Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. The New Orleans Pelicans podcast starts right now.
Welcome to the Pelicans podcast. I am Joe Cardosi, joined by the sinewy Jim Eichenhofer. The man has been running laps around the parking lot, pumped as a man can be for the Pelicans to begin. I love the outfit. I love the grind that you're putting in. And you've got some audio for us today. You have been just working nose to the grindstone, Jim.
Well, I don't think it's really that difficult, or I don't think I need that big of a pat on the back.
You're like a coal mine.
Do the thing of, yeah, no, that's going too far in the other direction.
Yes.
But yeah, no, we have a clip from Sports Illustrated's podcast, The Crossover. One of the themes of preseason, I think that we've discussed a few times, is just the ceiling that this team has, the potential that they have.
Yeah.
We saw it halfway through last season. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to be carried through the rest of the year because of injuries. But in this clip, Chris Mannix, who's one of the hosts of the show, talks about just his thoughts on the Pelicans, of the upside that they have. And then at the end of this clip, you'll hear Chris Herring as well, who's the other host of SI, The Crossover.
On paper, if they're healthy, and they've had, as you said, some injury issues early on, they got everything. They've got defenders. They've got two elite scorers. They can play big. They can play a little bit small. I don't know who the hell guards Zion when he plays five in some of these situations. He is going to be a force in those situations. So I think the ceiling for this team is conference finals with the Pelicans. I think they can make the conference finals with this group because CJ McCollum, experienced playmaker, I mentioned they got shooters. I think this could be a conference finals team. They need everything to break right, as most teams in the Western Conference do. But they showed me enough last year with these guys playing together to make me believe that was sustainable over a regular season. And when you get to the playoffs, where, as you know, the game slows down, it does become more isolation heavy. You need guys that can make plays on their own. They got two of them. And three maybe with McCollum, who can make some plays on his own too. So they got enough. They can get to a conference finals. Can they beat like a Denver in the conference finals? Could they beat, let's say things break right for the Suns? I don't know. But this year, that's a team that can make the conference finals. I believe it.
Yeah,
So
I think they're capable, and I really wish that they had been in the playoffs full stop. I really wish, obviously, Zion had never been hurt because they had shown, even that series they had against the Suns, where they really gave the Suns a lot to handle until Chris Paul made like 15 straight shots or whatever it was. They're a really good team, and they have a lot more top-end talent than some of the best teams in the West, I think, which is unusual, which is why I think they need their depth and everybody healthy to kind of be able to show that off. Otherwise, they come up short in one way or the other, but they're certainly capable. I would love to see them at full strength just to see them have a chance to really show what they can do.
Jim, do you remember that video game Street Fighter 2? You know those levels where E Honda would just go and just destroy a car, those bonus. That's what I want to do right now. Listening to that, as excited as I am, I don't want to ruin your Lamborghini. I'll make sure it's someone else's. But, man, I'm pumped up, and I agree. There's just so much unrealized, untapped potential in this team because you see glimpses of it and then something happens. And finally, you see this team at full strength. You see a healthy, leaner Zion. You see everything except for the Trey Murphy news, I feel like, has just been a great offseason. And you just want to see how much hay this Pelicans team can make when fully healthy. I'm so sick of the what ifs.
Yeah. No, this is also something that I wrote about Monday afternoon. This will be posted. I'm sure it'll be on the site by the time people listen to this. Just the fact that this roster is very unique in that you have a bunch of young guys that are talented and are going to continue to get better, but you also have a team that can compete right now, as evidenced by the fact that they started out so well last year and were at the top of the Western Conference. So it's a really interesting combination. If they can get, a much healthier slate than what they had last year, I feel like everyone is excited to watch them play. And it's not just us. There's plenty of people across the country that are saying, man, this Pelicans team was so much fun through the end of December last year. and we'd love to see them do that again, but just over the course of all 82 games.
Isn't it fun to go from that switch of hearing people go, oh, the New Orleans has a basketball team, to, man, they're going to make some noise. That happened like that. And it feels like you just have that ace in the hole with Zion. And it's almost like you had a Lamborghini. You're used to this. You had a Lamborghini just in the garage, covered up. It's not getting any miles on it. You're just keeping it fresh. And now we're about to release that thing on the open road and open it up. Jim, I know you've got plenty of experience with that. Now we get to see it with Zion. I'm excited.
If only I could live the life that you've envisioned for me.
The James Bond-esque life of Jim Eichenhofer. He's very humble.
If only I could do that. So, I guess we could apply that to the Pelicans too. If only we can get everybody out there on the court for the vast majority of the season, we will be living our best life, and
we'll be living La Vida Loca,
yeah,
man.
Exactly.
Come on.
We'll have a fun time, and it'll be a fantastic season.
Absolutely. And speaking of living La Vida Loca, we couldn't be more excited. I've got my hands on my hips. I'm ready to dance. Mr. Will Guillory of The Athletic. You can follow him at Will Guillory on X, which makes it seem dirty, but it's formerly known as Twitter. Let's get him in the studio here. Let's make the man comfy. Get some news from Mr. Will Guillory of The Athletic. Joining us in the illustrious Pelicans podcast studio. So glad to have him in here. The Athletics, Mr. Will Guillory. You know him covering the Pelicans. You watch out for all of his articles. Man, we got a lot to talk about. Thanks for coming in here, man.
I appreciate y'all for having me on, man. It's always fun to get our annual tradition of getting me on here to do the preview.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being close to Jim, I know, is a big honor for everybody involved, myself included.
Well, Will gets this honor very frequently. We definitely won't have you on just once a year. I think you mean in terms of actually being here physically in the studio. I'm sure we'll have you on a lot more than that. So we love to hear your insights on players. I saw you on local TV last night with the esteemed Fletcher Mackel, and he actually also made reference to your jump shot ability, your shooting touch, and actually,
I want to see Fletcher shoot. I want to see his outside. How does Fletcher shoot? Have you ever seen him on the court?
We played in the media game, and I'll just say that one of his shots went over the backboard.
Okay, that's about what I expect.
I'll say you probably don't want to see his jump shot.
What's wrong with this ball, Something's weird with this ball,
He's more of a screen. Maybe you want him more setting screens and doing stuff off the ball.
Hustle guy, diving for some loose balls.
Yeah, there we go.
That's Fletcher's game.
Yeah, I was about to say the Mackles may confuse you with some of the trick plays they run together. But, don't fall for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Will, was in terms of you play quite a bit. I wanted to get into some of the younger players on this team. I know one of the things that Fletcher asked you about on the show last night was breakout players, and you referenced Dyson Daniels as a player to keep your eye on. What do you think, from what you've seen in preseason and camp and stuff like that, are the areas where you think he can make the biggest jump?
The biggest thing is just watching Dyson last year. It just felt like everything just came so early for him. And it felt like he kind of got thrown into the fire, way too soon. And part of that was just injuries, them just needing him. Yeah. And I think you especially saw like last year, closer to that playing game, it just seemed like everything was moving way too fast for him.
Yeah.
He wasn't very confident in his offensive game. And I think just having a full summer where he was able to add some strength, spend some time playing with Team Australia in the World Cup, really was, adding some things to his jump shot. He talked to us about, making some tweaks to his form, spending time with Fred Vincent. So I think he's just coming in just a more confident player, a stronger player. I think he knows what he wants to do when he has the ball in his hands. And we know ultimately the main thing he's going to bring is he's a great defender, versatile. When you can play him and Herb Jones together, you could be very disruptive defensively with those two
cerebral players on the court at the same time.
Really smart guys, can pass the ball, unselfish. And of course, both of those guys, the story is going to be how many jump shots are you going to make, because teams are going to leave them open. Yeah. But I think with Dyson, maybe even a little bit more than Herb, he's able to do things to kind of take advantage of when you leave him open, driving into the paint, making those extra passes. I'm really high on Dyson and what he can do in year two. And I think what some of the things the Pelicans are emphasizing this year with playing smaller lineups, playing faster, kind of going smaller with Zion at the 5, having a guy like Dyson out there is going to be really valuable, having those switchable defenders on the wing.
He had a game, I think it was in Miami, where he did maybe say 3 or 4 things, and they were all negative. He ended up only being on the court for like 5 minutes and that kind of thing. It seems like like you said, his confidence has increased so much. What do you think in terms of the strength that he's put on the muscle? What do you think that that's going to translate to, or how do you think that's going to help him the most on the court this season?
Well, one, just being able to defend bigger players. I think that's big. Just being like able to switch 1 through 4. We say that, but then you go up against like a Jimmy Butler and like, okay, Dyson's maybe a little too small.
Yeah,
you know
Dyson
what I mean?
was like already kind of a bigger guard, but in height only. Now to
Yes.
see him filled out and be able to take some of those blows and stuff, it's going to be interesting to see this year.
Absolutely. And the other part is what we saw last year a lot with Dyson, where he would kind of drive into the lane and just stop because he didn't want to bump anybody and get into the rack.
Yeah.
He was kind of similar to what me and Jim saw a lot with Lonzo Ball here in New Orleans, where he would take those 1 and 2 dribbles and he'd be like, okay, I'm way too far in the paint. I got to get off of the ball.
Yep.
And I want to see more with Dyson this year, bumping into guys, going directly to the rim, trying to finish through contact. I think when you know you have more muscle, you feel more confident making those type of plays because, I mean, he's got the size. The guy can get into the paint and get shots at the rim. It's about just having that confidence and knowing that you can get in there and kind of bump off of somebody and you can still get your
You
shot
can
off.
wear a team out when you have that physicality between Dyson with a Zion with all of these young, fast players. It just seems like you can run teams up and down the floor and just sort of wear them out in the paint.
Yeah, I mean Zion is so great at getting to the foul line too. I wonder if that's something that Dyson will be able to do more of. I mean, he's got to be more consistent with his free throw shooting too. You mentioned Herb. What have you seen in preseason that you think he can build upon and that he can make another stride in year 3? One thing I noticed, it seems like his finishing around the basket is improved.
Yeah, I was gonna say he just seems more aggressive. It seems like just getting shots. We saw a couple times where he'll catch a rebound and just go the length of the court and lay it up. That's something that we haven't seen as much with Herb. And you know, everybody knows Herb spends a million hours in the gym, so we know he's working on that corner 3. I think that's something we've seen him hit a little bit more in the preseason, just letting it fly. I think with Herb, a lot of times you'll see him catch that shot and he's hesitating, or he kind of travels because he doesn't want to
It's
take
almost
the
like
shot.
he stayed in his lane to a detriment. He was a
Yes.
defender and he didn't want to be in the way on offense, but you're starting to see that pay off, that work he's been
Yeah,
putting in.
exactly. Just being more confident. The same thing we're saying with Dyson in his offensive game and what his identity is going to be. And he said it a million times. He knows when he's on the court with that starting 5, teams are going to leave him open. They're going to dare him to take shots. So he's got to take them. Even if you're not making them at a 40% clip, you got to show that you're willing to take that shot and you can punish defenses when they leave you open. Because even though it doesn't feel like a good shot, that's probably the best shot you're going to get a lot of possessions if you're left wide open in that corner. So you got to take it. And also, what we're talking about already with James Borrego playing faster, getting those transition opportunities. We know Herb is a great player in transition, so just being more aggressive, looking for those opportunities is going to be big for him.
One guy we definitely have never had any concern about whether he's going to, get shots up is Jordan Hawkins, was the 14th pick in the draft. What are your impressions of him so far in preseason, as well as your assessment of his ability to contribute as a rookie right away?
Listen, Jim, you know I love me a shooter that shoots the ball. So I've enjoyed the Jordan Hawkins experience in preseason. Now, he hasn't knocked them down at the rate we expected, but I just love to see the confidence in the young guy coming in. I think he's still got some ways to go. Like we talked about with Dyson, adding some muscle, being able to withstand defensively against some of these bigger guards. But we mentioned it with this team, they want to get more 3-pointers up. They want to play faster, and that's going to play directly into Jordan's hands, especially when you're missing Trey Murphy for the first month or so of the season. You got to find ways to replace those 3-pointers. And every time we talk to Willie Green, he's always emphasized it's not just one guy that's going to replace that Trey production. It's everybody's got to chip in. Everybody's got to add to their volume of 3-pointers. And I think Jordan Hawkins is going to be one of those guys who can get up more shots. And he's talked about it when he was in college. People were inside his jersey every time he got the ball. Everybody knew who he was. He was a focal point of that UConn offense. And here, when you're playing with Zion and B.I., he's just stepping into wide open threes all the time, which is a brand new world for him.
But between the amount of spacing he's going to get in the NBA and also just his ability to shoot on the move, it just seems like he'll be able to take different shots than maybe a spot-up 3 and some of those easier threes that you would expect him to open up the floor with. Just having that ability to stretch the floor in different ways seems like it's going to be invaluable to this team.
Yeah, and the Pels really haven't had a movement shooter like that, since J.J. Redick, right? And I think that adds a different dynamic to your offense, especially when you have a guy like Zion where you take one wrong step and he's dunking on you.
Right.
So I think you want to take advantage of that movement in Jordan Hawkins, and I think that's something that they've emphasized as well this year with the offense is that off-ball movement, taking advantage of defenses, because it seemed like the past few years so often it will be all eyes on B.I., all eyes on Zion whenever they had the ball, and I think they want to take advantage of that by moving guys away from the ball ball to get some easy opportunities, and Jordan Hawkins fits right into that.
Continuing with the young core, I mean, we could be here forever talking about some of the young talent on this team, but a couple guys that we haven't seen at all during preseason due to injuries. Trey Murphy, I think a lot of people are expecting him to make another improvement, but what do you think is his ultimate ceiling as far as what he could be as an NBA player?
I think he could be an all-star level guy for sure. I think he could be right around that neighborhood of guy. I mean, already we saw him in his second season be a guy who shot 60% on twos and 40% on threes. That's a small class of guys who can do that, especially the way he's doing it, where he's getting these crazy dunks at the rim. He's shooting from 30 feet away on his three-pointer. So he does it in a way that very few people are able to do it, and he's still so early in his development.
It's like he found a video game cheat code when he hit that growth spurt. He's like, oh, I can do something other than shoot. I can dunk on people. He's just having fun with a game genie now.
He's like, he can shoot it from half court and do a 360 windmill. Like, it's not too many guys that are able to do that in the NBA, and I think what you're going to see from him is adding more of that in-between game, getting to some of those mid-range jumpers, being able to hit floaters, because we know everybody's going to try to run him off of the three-point line. That's going to be the key anytime people see him on the court, so being able to take advantage of that and hitting some of those 10 to 15-foot shots. When you're a 6'8" guy with his type of reach, you can get to those shots, but I think it's not always comfortable for him because he's more of a standstill shooter. He's not a guy who's going to be like B.I., getting into the paint, bouncing off of 2 feet and getting those fadeaway jumpers, but he wants to add that to his game, and then the more he does that, I think the guy I think about a lot is Mikal Bridges, where his offensive game was very limited in Phoenix, and over the years, he just kept adding smaller pieces to his game, and now all of a sudden, he's a guy who's averaging 25 a game, and I'm not necessarily in trade necessarily it's going to be a 25-point scorer, but I think that's kind of the prototype you want to see, where the physical attributes are there, but you just want to keep adding little pieces to his offensive game, and then you're going to see that fuller picture, 4 or 5 years down the line.
As far as Jose Alvarado, I mean, I can't imagine how much he's itching to get back on the court. It's been, a long time since he's been out there.
Yeah, he just guards me trying to get in the building now. He's just trying to get on anybody.
Yeah, he stole my notebook the other day from behind.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's staying busy.
But I mean, in terms of maybe what you saw in his second season before he did get injured and was out for the rest of the year, what do you think are some of the things that you saw, or what are the areas you think when he does get back on the floor that he's going to be able to take another step in?
Yeah, I think one thing people kind of sleep on with Jose is that he was third on this team and made three-pointers last year. And we talked about it already. They need that volume to go up with three-pointers, and Jose is a big part of that. And I think during that last 20, 30 game stretch of the season, that you really missed his presence, not just as a three-point shooter, but as an alternate ball handler, to take some of that pressure off of CJ and B.I. And his energy, it just feels different when he's on the court, even when he's not doing the GTA steals or getting other guys on the opposing team angry. You just feel his energy as soon as he steps on the court.
He's
the unfortunate thing, the only people feeling his energy right now are the medical staff, and I promise you, they can't wait to get him off of their hands so they can, because he's dying to get. I mean, I was talking to him back in summer league, and he was like, "Well, I can't wait to get back out there." Sure. He was dying to get back. I mean, that guy was so antsy to get back after missing that long stretch because he felt how much he can impact the game at the end of the season, and he knew that he was going to be able to help that team if he was there, and he just couldn't because of the injury, and unfortunately, he sprains his ankle during the summer. But I think Jose still has a lot of room to grow on offense. I think he still has more potential than people kind of see in him, because I think they kind of pigeonhole him as like a TJ McConnell kind of, bug, kind of the bug on defense who can do a little bit of stuff on offense. But I think he can do much more than that offense, as a creator, as a three-point shooter, as a guy who can play with the ball, play off the ball. I think he's way more talented than people give him credit for, and I think he's super excited about this season, what he can do.
Well, a lot of the times that people are not giving him the credit he deserves is he's taking those shots and making him pay for it. And the more you can sort of open up those shots as he gains a reputation as a shooter, I'd love to see how it benefits the rest of the team. I mean, that we were talking about earlier, Jim and I, we were talking about the moves that it seems like every team has made. And the Pelicans are just sort of slow and steady, growing internally, youth movement, sort of building around what they have already. What do you see as some of the more significant moves that we've seen, especially in the West, which is going to be insane? And how do you think the Pelicans can sort of compete in that slow and steady, just building with what we have sort of mindset.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is obviously Bradley Beal going to Phoenix. I think
Yeah.
that's a huge one. I think in my mind, it's probably them and Denver as my 1 and 1A, the two top teams in the Western Conference. Just the explosiveness they have on offense and the way they kind of rebuilt that roster. Kind of some of the same stuff the Pels want to do. They want to play smaller. They want to play fast. They're going to try to get up a whole bunch of three-pointers this season. And I think something we're seeing with a few different teams in the West where we're kind of getting rid of that traditional point guard mold where Phoenix doesn't really have a true point guard. The Spurs kind of announced they're going to start Jeremy Sohan at point guard. I think we're going to see more teams kind of switching up the ball handling roles and not necessarily need a 6-foot guy out there to control the offense. And I think the Pels kind of fall into that same mold where I think you're going to kind of see B.I. as the main point guard for this team. And obviously Zion's going to have ball handling opportunities where I think a lot of that went to CJ last year. Obviously, it was needed while Zion was out. But I think they're going to want to use CJ more as an off-ball weapon this year. Some of that off-ball screening stuff that we talked about with Jordan Hawkins, maybe a little bit more spotting up because they got to replace Trey Murphy's three-point shooting. But I think that's going to be more of a trend we see around the NBA, kind of getting rid of traditional point guards and just saying, hey, whoever our best ball handler is, just give him the ball and surround him with shooters, and we'll figure it out from there. And if you can have bigger lineups out there, if you can be more switchable as a result, then that's just a bonus. And I think we're going to see more of that throughout the NBA.
For many seasons, we complained around here about how the West was so much better than the East. And, some people want the Pelicans to be in the East based on geography, but
redraw the lines. Come on.
I feel like it's not the case anymore that the West is so much better than the East. And I mean, the East might be slightly better, even you could make the case. But I think the depth of the West is the thing that
East
makes
is
it so unusual. I mean, do you think is this the deepest the West has been like since you've been covering the NBA and the hardest it's going to be?
That's insane
just
to
make
say.
the playoffs.
I know it really is insane to say, but I think I don't know how you can deny it. I mean, when you're looking at the Spurs, who were the worst team in the league last year, they got
Wemby.
Victor Wembanyama. You know what
the
I mean?
Spurs just never have luck. That poor
Yeah,
organization.
Finally,
really
things
suffering.
broke right.
Finally
for
get
them.
a good big guy out there. They never see good big guys. And then you got Houston adding Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet. They're going to be much better this year. You got, basically every single team in the West has hope
all
of going to the playoffs this year. Every single one. You go down to Utah, even Portland a little bit. I think I like those three guards they got down there. They got Jeremy Grant. They got DeAndre Ayton starting at the 5. Robert Williams coming off the bench. That's a pretty good top 7 they got there in Portland. So I think, every single night in the West, we see this every year, but every single night in the West, it's going to be a dogfight, especially when we get beyond the All-Star break, because I guarantee it's going to feel like 4 or 5 teams once again battling for those playing spots. And every single time you lose a game, you're going to drop from 9 to 12. If you win a game, you're going to jump from 10 to 7. And every night is going to feel so much pressure. And I think that's where a team like the Pelicans, we say this every year with the Pels, you got to emphasize a good start. You got to build a cushion for yourself so you're not in a position where they were last year where you're fighting, clawing just to get a 9
Just
seed.
mentally digging yourself out of the hole takes a
Yeah,
toll.
it takes a
along with the
toll,
physical.
man.
And there's no room. The early schedule for this Pelicans is brutal. So it's going to be a gauntlet, and there's no room to relax because the first game, Memphis Grizzlies. Now they're without Ja, but that's still just a tough team that just seem to have a little something extra for the Pels. What do you think they can do to sort of start the season off right against that tough Grizzlies team?
And I'll tell you, every time they go to Memphis, it's like a house of horrors.
It is,
It seems like every time the game's over, like middle of the first quarter.
Raph is traumatized. He can't even go enjoy
He
the
hates
Hill
going to
Street.
Memphis, man. And last year, knock on wood, Memphis was the place where B.I. hurt the toe right before Thanksgiving. So it seems like just something goes wrong every time they go to Memphis.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is that Memphis team just has so much athleticism. They're able to run the court. Jaren Jackson is kind of the perfect guy you want to stop Zion from getting to the paint. I think last year you saw that battle what they kind of put in the blueprint a lot of teams started using, where they kind of used Dylan Brooks as kind of the fire hydrant you put in front of Zion, and then you have Jaren Jackson in the back protecting the rim. And I think that was really effective for them going against Zion last year. And I think you saw a few other teams use that same kind of game plan. Now, you got to have the right personnel to do that, right? And even I think Zion will figure that out eventually if he sees it enough. But I think now without a Steven Adams there, it makes them a little bit smaller. It makes it a little bit more difficult to defend a Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas front
they
court.
need that physicality in the paint with
Yes,
Steven Adams.
absolutely. And of course, we know how much Dylan Brooks. I voted Dylan Brooks as a first team all defense guy last year for them. So I think that's going to be a big loss. And of course, you mentioned no John Morant at point guard. So I think they're going to try to make this into an ugly 95-98 type game.
Yeah.
And the Pelicans don't want to play those games this year. So I think it's going to be our will versus your will going into that first game. And a big part of it is how much Zion Williamson and JV can dominate in the paint when the Memphis goes to some of these smaller lineups.
Yeah, Memphis was 28-14 when Steven Adams played last year. I mean, they had a good record overall, but it was much better when he was on the court, so that's a big loss. I think one of the most interesting parts of Wednesday's game, and I mean, a lot of this is very unfortunate that both teams don't have even close to their full roster. I mean, with Trey Murphy out for the Pelicans, and Memphis has multiple guys, but I think it's going to be a really good initial test of the depth of both teams. I think that's one thing that I think if New Orleans can win this game, I mean, it would be a great start to the season, but Memphis is one of those teams where it's like they go 11, 12 deep, so they've been able to sustain, having guys out so far. So I think that's just something that people can look forward to in Wednesday's game.
And Memphis is known for being a great defensive team, and they take away what you do well. And I think that's going to be a big test for the Pelicans because it's been up and down for them in the preseason.
Yeah.
Putting this new offense in, they've had some good moments, but they had some really bad moments during the preseason. And that comes with learning a new offense, figuring out how you're going to make this thing work. But then when you go against a team like Memphis, that's going to be a real test because, like I mentioned, Jaren Jackson, the defending, defensive player of the year. They got great defenders over there. Taylor Jenkins is one of the best
They
young
know how to
coaches
get
in
under
this
your
league.
skin, too.
Absolutely.
Throw you off your game.
I guarantee we're going to have one or two push because some guys
For sure.
pushing. We're going to have a technical foul in this game at some point.
be.
Jose Alvarado, if he's not playing, they're going to have to hold him back from jumping off the bench.
He might get a bench tag.
Yeah, he
Najee
might.
too.
I'm willing-
Najee too.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah.
him back.
I was about to say, Najee and Jose, they may just need to tape off to keep them from running on
I don't
the
know
court.
if FanDuel has a Jose Alvarado getting a bench tech parlay, but
I would take it.
You could take it. That's free money right there. That's what I call that.
I'm excited about it, man. It's a great way. It is nerve-wracking to start off against a team like that's had our number. But, man, I'm going to be ready to run through a wall if we come out strong in that one. And that's going to be one of those games. Like you said, we've been talking all offseason about how the Pelicans can be pick your poison. We got outside shooters. We got inside shooters. We got, physicality. We got finesse. We're going to see, I guess, against this Memphis team as they try to muddy up the waters. Will, thanks again for hopping on with us, man. It's going to be an exciting season. Check him out at Will Guillory on X. One of my favorite tweets that you recently posted is how weird it's going to be to root for a Matt Ryan in a New Orleans jersey. That shook me to my core. I was like, I never thought about that.
Yeah, it's going to be really strange.
It
Really
is.
strange.
It is. A lot of people are going to be torn.
I just want to convince Matt Ryan, PR wonder for the Pelicans to do his Spider-Man meme pick with
Yes.
Matt Ryan, the basketball player.
Yes.
We need some of that.
Huge thanks to Will Guillory. Nice to have him in the studio and not on a telephone. His charm shines right through this microphone, I can tell you. As does yours, Jim, man. It was a sunny day. Two just happy-go-lucky fellas. Two bards of the New Orleans sports scene in studio here. I just feel like a real dummy with you guys typing all your big words. I'm excited about the season, and it seems like we all are sort of on the same page. This is going to be a tough test early in the season, but man, it would be great to see the New Orleans Pelicans pass it.
And after the first test, there's a second test that comes shortly thereafter. And that is the New York Knicks will be here on Saturday, which is the home opener in the Smoothie King Center.
No relaxing.
Games at 6 p.m. On Mondays throughout the season, I think we're going to try to go through the schedule of that week.
Yes.
Week one,
The schedule, if you will.
week one of the NBA, they only play 2 games, so it's a little bit light in terms of number of opponents, but we broke down, I think, pretty intently and comprehensively the Memphis Grizzlies with Will Guillory. The Knicks, the second opponent this week, I think. I mean, that's a good team coming in here. I think it's a pretty interesting squad to be the visitors for the home opener. Coming off a very good season, they've kind of been an every other season kind of team lately, where Last year they were really good. 2 years ago they
Seems like the Nets
struggled.
got all the pub, and the Knicks have just been sort of quietly getting better.
Yeah, which is hard to. It's hard for any Knicks team to be quiet about anything because you have people like Stephen A. and a legion of media members who follow every second of every Knicks game. But yeah, I think they are. I think part of why they're quote unquote under the radar is they don't have like that big star.
Right.
They have Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. Both of those guys are solid players, but they're not, the marquee guys. Although I do think that Brunson's star is ascending based on he played for USA Basketball and was one of their key guys. So pretty solid team. It's always a challenge when you go up against a Tom Thibodeau defense.
It's just the Eastern Conference team you don't get to see as much. I feel like we don't have them figured out as well as maybe some of these other teams, but you got to hope that the Pelicans can out-grit them. As we were talking about with Will, I just feel like it is a pick-your-poison kind of team on paper, the Pelicans. You're going to have to see them figure it out in real time, which you saw them struggle with a bit in preseason. And again, that's what preseason is for. Hopefully we're going to see a more solid, stable version of that going into this Knicks game.
And a random fact, the Knicks were actually the last home game last season, and they're the first home game this season. So just a little tidbit. It doesn't really mean anything, but I just figured I would throw that out there.
Throw
just
it out
a
there
random
to your coworker, blow their mind.
Yeah, and last thing from me as far as looking ahead to this week, I'm going to try to do every Monday talk about a player to watch. And for week one for me in these games against the Grizzlies and the Knicks, I'm going to go with Dyson Daniels. Just because I feel like we don't know what Jose Alvarado's status is right now. But either way, I think Dyson's going to have a pretty big role. He's definitely a guy that we're going to be keeping close attention on in terms of the development that he makes. He's in year 2. He got some good experience as a rookie, but I think people expect that he's going to make a pretty big jump this year. And the other guard in the backcourt coming off the bench that we talked about with Will too is Jordan Hawkins. He's a rookie. I mean, we expect big things from him too, but I mean, you just don't know how a rookie's going to come in. So I think
I don't want to put too much weight on the expectations of Jordan Hawkins, but it's just another piece of the puzzle. What he on paper adds the availability of on your shot chart is nice, but you don't want to be hinging your success on Jordan Hawkins, and we're not. But boy, that adds a very interesting wrinkle if he is what we think he could be.
It does, and I think again, just like with the status of Jose, we're not sure about what it's going to be. I think Dyson Daniels, and the reason I go back to him as my player to watch is that I feel like he has a chance to be kind of the anchor for the bench, the guy that they can lean on, especially in the backcourt with some of the other guys being really young or guys that are uncertain like Jose.
It's for a second-year guy to be a savvy vet on the team, but I think that's what's so exciting about this team is as much as we're worried about them gelling and playing their roles well, the fact that they are so young and we're a building team, it must be depressing to be one of these fan bases where we signed another old guy. Let's hope that fills the cap. Yeah. We've been there, all right? We have been there in past seasons. It's not fun.
Absolutely.
So as frustrating as maybe some of these early growing pains may be, because the Pelicans are bound to have some with this amount of youth and with the amount of moving pieces and a new offense they're trying to figure out. But man, if they can gel it together, the sky really is the limit. It's been great to see the Pelicans getting some of this national pub, seeing them linked in, the top 5 league pass, teams to watch and all this stuff. I feel like we genuinely can live up to that hype this season.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that you talked about was just having a bunch of young pieces that are in the pipeline that are going to keep getting better. I think it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to build through the draft, and a lot of people like that philosophy, but what happens with a lot of teams is you say we're going to build through the draft, and then you miss on a bunch of guys.
I'm saying it's like if in 2 or 3 years you've missed out, you're kind of just it's a barren wasteland.
You're back to square one. But I think the thing that's exciting is we've seen repeatedly with a lot of the picks, especially since 2021, where they were able to get Trey in the first round, Herb in the second round, and then Jose undrafted. I mean, they've hit
quote,
on a lot of these
late
guys
in the first round trade, because generally, like NBA fans, are like, oh, if it's not a top 4 or 5 pick,
right. Yeah, he was 17.
Yeah,
so I mean, it's not just that they decided that the draft is important; it's the fact that they've made good decisions, and I think because of that, the foundation is really good, especially compared to a few years ago when they were just starting this whole project.
We are the Pelicans podcast. We will be talking to you once again on Wednesday. And until then, Pels.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here